We can do that as individual communities and working with different people in the Sacramento and in local government who tend to graduate up, right? You have city council members, school board members, and they move up. And so you want to be working with everybody. I think we have a great opportunity in this state to work on infrastructure. And Orange County is one of the biggest. Lucy is a big driver of that. Infrastructure is billions of dollars of investment. And I don't know all the statistics. I was reading this morning that $1 billion of investment can be 30,000 jobs, 15,000 direct jobs, and indirect, meaning right on the job site, and another 15,000 that come from just residual businesses that might be benefiting from that growth. I always think those numbers are overstated. But if you're investing in California in roads, if you're investing in, all kinds of things that are traditional infrastructure, that's great. And by the way, we never get our fair share in the state of California. We should get that money from the federal government. We should get that money from the state of California through bonds if we can. Just a quick, factoid for you. If you right now, well, you do this as taxpayers, when we pay our dollar to the federal government, we get back 70 cents. If you're in Iowa and you pay $1, you get back a lot more than us. You know why? Because we subsidize other states. We subsidize other states. So we should get our fair share. So we should never apologize for the roads that we want to build or the different large infrastructure projects we want to build. Right now, we're going to have a big debate on water in California. That's a huge issue to you guys here. I hope I don't know what's going to happen, Diane, but I hope that serious adults look at this issue and decide how are we going to rebuild a system that we haven't invested in since Governor Brown and Governor Reagan. Governor Brown and Governor Reagan, both parties, different views, both invested in California. We haven't put investment like that in the state since those two governors. That's not fair to the students that are in the room. Somebody has to say, we're going to invest for the next 20, 30 years. I go through the clips a lot of the old, large, projects and what happened back then. Governor Brown and Governor Reagan got hammered. I am sure that somebody protested the building of this campus that Governor Reagan dedicated, saying we can't afford it or we shouldn't do it. But that was a vision, and now look, you've got 27,000 students or whatever it was here, huge. So let's make sure that we do that investment in infrastructure and keep going forward. I think we have a real good chance, like I said, on some business regulation reform, and I think that's important. And I would want to make sure that when we do that, small businesses at the table. So please be involved, use your organizations, and go through that. I talked about water, which I think is critical, and I do think you're going to have a large debate on tax reform in California. You're going to see it nationally. Go over the cliff or not go over the cliff, you're going to still see a large debate on tax reform, and we're going to have to see it in California. You cannot sustain a state that's the highest income tax, that's the highest sales tax, all these other things. There's going to have to be some reforms and trade-off, and I think people are ripe to do that. Diane will know about that better than I do. But so if you guys don't have any other questions, I would just say that I am not convinced that it's as doom and gloom in California as everybody wants to think. There's no doubt that it will get better because things are getting better. But we have to acknowledge how important that small business innovation entrepreneur is to the state of California. I mean, that is what's changed everything. And just a small example to give you as I close. When I was traveling around the state, when I was the minority leader, the Republican leader, I didn't run on an education campaign, didn't think about a lot. I went to public schools, graduated from Fresno State, assumed that they had pretty much enough money, and you kind of go forward. It wasn't my big issue. It was not uncommon. In fact, it was common to be meeting with CEOs and they would say, hey, by the way, do not stop the investment in California's education. And so I started asking, well, tell me why. And they could cite CEOs from all over the state, changed my entire perspective on education funding because they said when you cut UC, you cut research. There's no Hewlett-Packards, there's no internet, there's none of these things that started because of that investment. Don't cut the UC system. CSU produces the people that we hire. We want these people. And they would just drill in about the community college system and technical training and how important it was and producing good people that could either go to work or into the university system. And if we cut those systems, we're cutting our future as a state. And I have to tell you that I still feel the same way. And I'm sure that many people in here do too. I'm not just speaking to the audience. We've got to find a way to keep ourselves funded well in education so we have successful kids that stay here. Because otherwise, we're going to lose that greatness about California. It's all about the future. We can't be thinking just now. So thanks so much for giving me a chance to chat. If you guys don't have any other questions, then I'll turn it over to the panel. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions for Mike or any of the panelists, we have 2 microphones on stands on either side of you today. You're very welcome to approach the microphone and address the panel, address Mike, address the ball if you're golfing today. That got a response. State your name and where you're from, and we'll be happy to entertain your question. Mike, I'm hopeful that you'll stick around for a couple of minutes, and there might be a question or two that we could lob your way, even though there's the panel, and technically speaking, you're still a part of it. All right. Let me introduce our esteemed panelists, to whom we are very grateful. We are grateful for their time, and we're grateful for their expertise. Unfortunately, Lucy Dunn, the CEO of the Orange County Business Council, could not make it this afternoon, but she sent in her stead a very able-bodied colleague of hers. He is the Vice President of Government Affairs. Please welcome Bryan Starr to the dais. Bryan, you brought your fan club. Or your sisters. Thank you. Welcome. The CEO of the Orange County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Reuben Franco. The host and executive producer of SoCal Insider on PBS SoCal, which used to be known as KOCE in my day, and the executive editor of the Orange County Business Journal, Mr. Rick Reiff. Welcome, Rick. The recently elected mayor of Mission Viejo, the Honorable Frank Uri. Welcome, Mr. Mayor. And our local California State Assemblywoman representing the 73rd Assembly District, the Honorable Diane Harkey. Thank you. So I'll be acting as your moderator today, and hopefully we won't overtax the public, nor will we overtax you as respondents. So I'm going to start with what I hope isn't too much of a softball question. And it has a lot to do with the future of small as well as big business, not only locally, but in our state and in our country. I'll start with a quote from an article that was recently published in the Sunday New York Times about a week or so ago by Ross Douthat. The article's title was "Our Enemy, the Payroll Tax." And the article begins with, there's a saying that politicians like to quote. We have 2 political parties in America. One is stupid, the other is evil. And when they join forces to do something that's both stupid and evil, well, that's what we call bipartisanship. So I would like to throw this open to the panel to see who can respond first and best to this. What is most likely and realistic in terms of a bipartisan movement, both in our state legislature and perhaps even in the Congress, that will foster and inspire entrepreneurship and innovation here in California and in our country? What could we expect as far as a bipartisan movement to help foster entrepreneurship and innovation? Would anyone like to try that one?
Sure.
Be our legislator.
Thank you.
First, I think we get words confused. Bipartisan seems to think we all get along. We do all get along in the legislature. There is no personal animosity. It is very much ideological, and it's for a reason. Right now in the legislature, it would be very difficult to have bipartisanship because one side is totally not needed. But I do expect that because of that, and what I saw last year when we had, when there was 2 extra Republicans, shall we say, that created that blocked the 2/3 vote. The Democrats as a whole don't always want to do all that they are accused of wanting to do. There's a lot of pressure on them, and there will be more pressure on them being the supermajority to cater to the groups that got them there. The problem with that will be is that the groups that got them there, be it the unions or some other group, will not be the same as the voters in the district. And the voters in the district right now are really watching. We have I believe, at least a few more moderate Democrats in the legislature that are going to have to be very, very circumspect before they decide, let's say, to break through the Prop 13 mold. Maybe even some other issues. And so I think for business interests, what's going to be very, very helpful is that because they have the ultimate power and hence the ultimate blame, you're going to see a little bit more moderation, because all of our businesses are hurting right now in everybody's districts. Everybody has issues with the regulatory environment. And one key example was last year when we had 13 Democrat legislators that were writing a letter to California Air Resources Board demanding that they perhaps stall the cap and trade auctions or offer free auctions because it was hurting the companies in their districts. Now that's 13 Democrats. They could have probably united with all of the Republicans in the same letter. So I think things like that will happen as we move forward, and those types of things that, like Mike mentioned, will be good for business interests. Is it going to be something that's overnight? No. Everything in politics is very incremental. So you'll see incremental changes, and I think that you just need to make your voices very much heard through these groups that Mike mentioned earlier, the NFI being one of them. Very important group, very active, very vocal.
I wanted to add on to that a little bit. What I think Diane said something very important, and that's moderation. From the Business Council's perspective, that's what we're looking for. It's not so much about what bipartisanship brings. Let's bring the state assembly or the state legislature. It's not so much what they should do or could do in a bipartisan fashion. It's what they should not do or won't do in a bipartisan fashion. What I mean by that, with the 2/3 majority in both houses, they have something that the voters have afforded to them, which is urgency legislation authorization. This is very, very scary for the business community, and it should be for every interest group. And what they can do is essentially, with the leadership's blessing, the Democrats, the majority party, can introduce, any member can introduce a piece of legislation, and it can literally be passed through both the upper and lower house and signed by the governor within 1 week. That's terrifying, and that is where the moderation needs to come into play. And so what the Business Council is focused on, along with our coalition partners, is really working with the moderate caucus of Democrats in both the upper and lower house, of which there are, by our count, about 20, along with the Republicans in the minority, to be able to block those kinds of plays. And that's where we'll be focusing a lot of our efforts. Hopefully won't have to employ it too often.
I'll throw out a few things a little bit from the city standpoint. I think maybe I'm not quite as optimistic that the legislature will be able to work in what we call the bipartisan fashion, but I think it actually creates quite an opportunity. And I'll give you a quick example. 4 years ago, the legislature, when they were having some of their financial desperation that's actually not as bad as it is now, they came to all the cities and were taking back some of redevelopment funds, about $2.5 billion. Mission Viejo got picked for $1.7 million. The legislature itself said, the legislation said, we're going to pay this money back in 3 years. That was last year. We didn't get our check. So I think I find that I'm not disappointed if I don't expect anything. I believe what that does, though, is it turns an opportunity from a business standpoint into a couple different areas. I definitely see there an opportunity to be more of a local control aspect in terms of how cities and other local municipality and local governments treat business. And I think that there's going to be a lot of competition among cities to get different businesses to come in, be it auto dealerships, be it Lowe's, Walmart's, Home Depots, mom and pop shops. Mission Viejo has no business license fee. We advertise that. We let people know about it. So I think to a certain extent, it's going to create, if the legislature can't solve it, the cities themselves and other agencies will do part of it. But I also think it's an opportunity for everybody, if their voice isn't being heard, to actually work with their local governments to fight the state. Give you a quick example there. We had some fire maps passed down in Mission Viejo from the state of California that our local residents didn't like. We fought it for over 8 months, and we actually got a waiver from the state fire department or fire agency to not have to implement their maps, which would have impacted their individual homeowners insurance rates. I see a lot more of cities teaming with business to fight the state when they do some things like that. So I guess from my perspective, I think a lot more of that bipartisanship may actually be figured out in the courts.
And locally.
And locally.
Thank you. Sticking with general business and politics, what changes do you see impacting small businesses in particular and small business owners the most as a result of the election? Now, this could be a national focus or a local focus. Take your pick. Panel? Rick?
I'll go state. Well, let's do state and federal together. Hey, that's nice. Small businesses. Well, if you're a sole proprietor, I'm not sure the direct impact will be that great. If you're a small business that maybe employs 10 people, 20 people, you're one of the rich. You're probably filing an individual return, and you now, congratulations, pay the highest income tax in the country. If you take the new 13% for people that make over $1 million, it starts going up at, I think it's 500,000. You make over $1 million, you're now paying 13.1%. With the fiscal, even if we go over the fiscal cliff, it goes up to 52% altogether with the federal and everything. And even if we don't go over the fiscal cliff, the rich are probably going to pay about that anyway. And so, that's the first thing. So what's happened, in my job, I talk to lots of rich people, and they've always bellyached, and businesses complain a lot. And I'm not saying it's not legitimate, but they do that all the time. But I'll tell you, after this election, I have never talked to so many wealthy people who are seriously thinking about moving out of the state. There have been a few that already have, but I mean, they are serious about it. And that's going to take a lot of the tax revenue. We are now in California even more dependent on the wealthy for our tax structure. And a lot of those people are going to leave, especially as they get older, and they've lived here a long time. They love California. They don't want to leave. But I mean, they're looking around surrounding states where their tax bill will be half or less. And they're doing it. So I think that if you're in that business category where you're making a few bucks, your taxes are going up. It's going to be tough. You're going to have to cut back, or be less competitive, or you'll move. As some of you can't, I'm sure, or don't want to. But I don't think it's a pretty picture for small business. Now, just to get back to some of the things Diane was saying and Michael was saying. I think there's a desire among some folks to compromise, and I think that, and I'll address that more later, perhaps, if anyone's interested. I just had 2 of the new Democrat moderates on my show, and I thought their comments were very interesting. To answer your question, it's stupid and evil. I think what's likely to happen are stupid and evil things, and not because people are trying to be stupid or evil, but the Democrats would love to help business. I really think in their heart, most Democrats want to help business, but they don't want to reduce revenue. So what are they going to do? Well, they'll have some tax incentives. They'll have programs. They'll spend money, invest in things, and so they'll spend money to help business. And Republicans will sometimes go along with it because they want to help businesses too. That's the kind of thing you're going to see. You'll see targeted tax breaks. If you can hitch your Starr to a green energy project or something like that, you'll benefit. But things that will actually help the economy in the long run, I don't see it. I think it'll be more harmful than good.
I think one of the concerns, going off of what Rick was saying, you've already figured out in the state of California you have 13.3% increase, or that on the highest rate. Now we're just trying to figure out what's going to happen federally, and I don't see the bipartisanship federally happening right now. I guess we kind of bipartisanship kind of got us already to where we're at today. That was a short-term measure that happened 2 years ago. What could happen, you have people look at least the business owners that we talk to. One party's taking us 100 miles an hour over the cliff. The other's taking us 50 miles still over the cliff. So we go over the cliff at 75 miles an hour, but we still go over the cliff. So they're not really looking to that. Talking about the NFIB and a study done by Ernst & Young, that top 2% represents a lot of people I used to frankly bank. These are people who file as subchapter S corporations. They use that money to grow their business. If you're adding on the taxes here in the state of California, you're adding on a higher tax rate federally. The estimate is a loss of 710,000 jobs. What I don't see being discussed is jobs right now on the federal level. This whole discussion is about tax rates and revenue, but we're in a world of hurt. You have 23 million unemployed or underemployed, and the business owners we talk to, given the fact over the last 4 years the cost of regulation has increased, or health care has increased, the cost of energy has increased, taxation's increased, and 4 years later we're talking about even doing more. That's not a good environment for them. They'll figure out how to get things done, but they're going to have to figure it out currently with what is on the ground. So.
Well, one of the most difficult concepts to get across in Sacramento is that revenue can equal job increases, can equal lower unemployment or higher employment. I had a study done by the legislative analysts that showed that a 2% drop in unemployment equaled $1.2 billion of revenue, straight line, assuming no multiplying factor to the state government. But that concept is not for some reason not ingrained. It's revenue always equals taxes, and so if we could kind of break that mold and somehow, because we know that revenue doesn't always mean taxes. What happens, or doesn't always increase, or tax increases don't always increase revenue. For example, every time we've kind of counted on, taxing the rich, quote unquote, we have more businesses leaving more. And I'm out in the business community a lot. And I want to go into something that's going on here in California, because you are going to see a lot of favoritism toward anything green or whatnot associated with technology. There's a new kind of group that I checked in on 2 years ago that is now got probably, I would say, 200 to 500 members. It's called Octane. Very interesting. They get venture capital, match it with concepts or inventions or creations in biotech, medical device industry, particularly in Orange County. And there's a lot to be done there, from computer software and everything else. But one of the things they were saying, which brings it into the community college system, is that they have the ability to cross-train for workers to actually go out and get these jobs in Orange County. But one of the issues at the university, if the university has the class, like at UCI takes the community college students and actually puts them through the training there. If they get hired prior to completing the training, the community college does not get reimbursed for that. So the community colleges are a little reluctant to send their people to it. So that's a piece of legislation, okay? That should be an easy fix. If your student gets either hired or completes the course, the community college wins. That way we have more technical training, because we're missing that big middle, growing ladder. We have the rich and the poor right now, and we're missing that ladder to get there. And I think this is kind of new. And I was down in San Diego with biotech and biocom. Lots going on down there, but you have to, and they're working with Boys and Girls Club to teach math and science. So the industries are taking a hand in helping with this and working with the community colleges like MiraCosta, like Orange Coast, like Saddleback, to have programs that will actually create that middle-level job that we really need in the manufacturing sector or what else. So I think there's some good things going on, but the taxation is really killing them as well. Very much hurting them if they want to expand or add people. It's very difficult to do that in California if it's easier to do it in another state.
I saw a lot of heads nod during that particular comment, and I was wondering what some others on the panel might think about training and the development of future middle skills employees and the impact of those middle skills employees on small business.
You want to go first?
I know this is largely about small business, but the Orange County Business Council represents some of the largest companies and employers in Southern California, about 200,000 in the county and about 2 million globally. And this is a big deal for them. I just met with one of our biggest investors the other day, Allergan, and they were telling me about their investment in UCI and their reliance on the students and professors that do research and development at that institution and how much they put into that. One of the things that's very frustrating for them is that a lot of those very highly educated and highly skilled students that graduate, when they graduate, they leave the state of California. And it's disappointing, but what Allergan has had to do, and they are an Orange County company, they are a California company, they have had to open very large research and development facilities in both Texas and New Jersey, employing thousands of individuals that should be housed here in the state of California, and many of them were trained in the state of California. This is very distressing to the largest businesses in California, and it's a problem that goes well beyond just small business.
We educate, incubate, and send out of state.
That's right.
And we've got to turn that around.
Well, and it's kind of funny. I've got a daughter who's in college, and she goes to school out of state. And we're completely worried about where she's going to live when she gets done. She's going to get a nursing degree. She's probably going to